now another reason why I wanted to do this video was to talk about cost. That is one thing that I feel sets my car apart from all the numerous other boosted IS300s. I do what I can with what I have. So I'm a single dad. I was in college the last 3 years. I was only doing side jobs. I didn't have a lot of money, but I like to play with cars. So I'm really tired of hearing, oh, you need to spend, $10,000 to make 400 wheel and boost your Lexus. That is for people who aren't car people, in my honest opinion. You can do quite a lot if you have knowledge, if you know what you're doing, and if you're not afraid to turn a wrench and get your hands dirty. You can do a lot. So I'll take you along and walk you through what I did on mine. So a couple disclaimers when we talk about cost. First off, my car is not winning any show points. I realize this. I don't really care. It's fun. This is a toy. I don't expect to break any records with it. I don't expect to win any car shows with it. All I expect is that it's fun. And I want it to be reliable, but I don't want to spend a ton. I have other projects. I have other cars. This is just me doing what I can with what I got. So another disclaimer, as you can see, I'm in a shop. My dad luckily has an auto shop. I am able to work on things out of the rain. Oop, we have a Camaro here. So I'm able to work on things, and I'm very, very fortunate in that aspect. So obviously not everyone has access to a shop, but it hasn't always been that way. I've done jobs in gravel parking lots in the rain. If there's a will, there's a way. Let's start from square one. I picked up the car for $1,000. Did it run? Yes. It had bad water pump, blown head gasket, misfires, bad mass airflow. It ran like poop, but it drove on the trailer. The first thing you need to do, pick a reasonable, realistic goal. Be realistic with yourself, your funds, and the use for the car. Not everybody can daily a freaking 1,000 horsepower car. Not everyone can afford even a 800 horsepower car. Be realistic and try to stick with it, because when you change your mind, you usually outgrow parts, you have to sell parts, that all just costs you money. The pistons and rods were very, very cheap. I managed to just trade my stock airbox for those rods and pistons. So very fortunate with that. The head gasket I got in a gasket kit, that was $100. That was with head bolts as well. Obviously I like to stretch things a little bit as far as things I can get away with, but I try not to reuse torque to yield head bolts, just because who wants to do a head gasket? Next would be I built the auto. Just shimmed accumulators, turned up pressure. That was free. I welded the diff. That was also free. Is that the right way to do it? No. I have recently gone to a BRZ diff, which gave me LSD. It is so much better to drive. Daily in a welded diff sucks. Try not to do that. It stresses your axles and drivetrain a lot more. I don't recommend it. Next would be fuel. Not much into the fuel system at all. It has a Walbro 450 that can be had for 110. I'm on Deca 80s, believe it or not. What I've seen as far as in the 2JZ crowd, those are shunned. I was told not to run them. I was told it wouldn't work and it wouldn't be worth it. But guess what? I'm running them. They end up being 840 cc's, and they work pretty awesome. You need the adapters from 14 to 11 millimeter, which is from Drift Motion. That was $50. And then you need the adapters for the plugs, which was $12 off of Amazon. And then the injectors themselves you can get for, I believe it's around $250. I also had I do have water meth on this car. And that was about $250 to do the water meth injection. The reason why I'm not relying solely on flex fuel is E85 is about 3 hours away from me. You have to drill and tap your fuel rail for the return. I have about $400 into it. It's a billet. It starts at H1E. It has the upgraded thrust washer, and it has the billet 60 by 87 compressor wheel, so it's a super HX40. Built this engine. I did some port and polishing work. New bearings. It's got King bearings in it now. Those were about $70, and I needed machine work. I needed my crank turned. Now the intercooler I was able to get for free. Just being in the car community, my buddy had an old, it's a Han Racecraft. It's old. It's 9 by 22 by 3.5. So it's decent size. With the water meth, I can hang around mid 80s intake temps when it's around 100 ambient. So it does its job. So the exhaust manifold was off of eBay. It was pretty much the same thing as what I was running in my Supra before. I had great luck with it. That was $140. As far as plumbing my turbo feed, we went through here and I just did the banjo bolt on the oil filter housing. It's really hard to see, but it's in there. Yep, there it is. So we have stock oil pressure light. We have the feed right there, and then there's our banjo bolt. So that's how you should feed the turbo. You can also do this bolt right here on the VVTi as well. As far as the intercooler piping, didn't really cost much at all. You can get those kits for $70, so we'll call that 70. Now, standalone. I went with the Megasquirt MS3X with knock module. Now, I bought it secondhand, but it had never been ran in a car. It was essentially just hooked up, and the guy changed his mind. So, picked that up for $600. New, they go for around $750. I then bought new flying lead harnesses in 2 foot, so that was $130. And then the logging cable was $20. So call that $750 I have into the standalone itself, and then we did GM intake air temp, and then GM engine coolant temp. And as you can see, I am in parallel with the stock ECU. Reason for this is I still have the auto, I still have AC, I still have cruise, I still have drive-by-wire. So I'm keeping the stock functionality of the car, and it all does work very well. Now, one other disclaimer is that I had to wire this thing in. Now that was a daunting task for sure. Under this hat right here is a giant rummage of wires. It is crazy, but they all make sense once you get through it. You've got to go through and get your diagrams. Obviously that's all time consuming. Not everyone wants to do it, but a lot of people want to stand alone for under $1,000. That's the way you got to do it. As far as exhaust, that's just going to be 3-inch V-band, 3-inch Mindrol, and some MIG welding. If you have a MIG welder, which most people do, yeah, it doesn't cost much at all. Call that $50 for the exhaust. Not everybody has to have it out of the fender like I do, but yeah, exhaust doesn't have to be too costly. Turbos appreciate the least amount of exhaust you can get away with. It's just a matter of what you can deal with as far as noise and comfort. Now, I did move the battery to the trunk, obviously. That was with 0-gauge welding cable. That was $3.30 a foot. So that was $65, I believe. And then you need a cutoff switch to be NHRA legal. We have a 3-port MAC valve. Those are very cheap. I believe $15. Air filter, about $15, also cheap. Alternator, we have a 150 amp Sequoia alternator. Got that for $120. It was remanufactured. Coils I got for $60. They're $10 a piece. So very good deal there. That woke the car up a lot. We have our aeromotive regulator. Obviously you need to run a return on these cars. That was, let's see, regulator you can get for about $100. Flex fuel sensor was $40 with pigtail. Now I don't TIG weld, so I did need to obviously cut my white pipe and move it up, and then going so close to the turbo, you got to do a lot for a heat barrier. So this is a 2.5-inch intercooler piping that is welded straight to the throttle body. So had my buddy weld those up for me. If you have to pay a fabrication shop for that, I'd imagine that's about 30 or 40, not too bad. I did a new water pump, that was $100. I needed the back housing as well. So looking at my turbo drain, what I did was it was in hard piping, just because you can see it runs so close to the header there. So even with the fiberglass heat shielding over AN line, it was having issues melting. So just did it in 5/8 ID hard piping, and then we went to the dash 10. The Subaru BRZ diff I got for $190. It had 80,000 miles on it. It was out of a 13. Now another disclaimer is that I tune my own car. I've been tuning for about 10 years now. Started with Mitsubishis and reflashable EEPROM ECUs. But this is actually my first standalone. It was a pretty hard learning experience. There was a lot of things I had to learn. Now, as far as the transmission, I did do external cooler just to give it a little more of a fighting chance. This is off of a 7M GTE. It was the oil cooler. So that was free for me. It should be free for you. Now, as far as the wastegate, I'm on a knockoff tile MVS 44 millimeter. That was $86. The turbo blanket was $20. Also off of Amazon. So God, other than that, I'm really not into this thing much at all. I mean, I'd be better off telling you all the things that are still stock on the car. Stock radiator and fans and cooling system. Stock cams. Other than the porting and polishing, the head is stock. It's stock valves. Obviously stock block. Stock intake manifold. You know, I'm still even using the butterfly here. Reason for that is I like torque. I also want to drift this car, especially after it gets a manual swap, and you know, that helps with torque a good amount. So as long as you have a check valve and you keep positive boost pressure out of it, it works pretty well. My only concern is that it is a source of a small boost leak. When I boost leak test this thing, you know, it does have a little bit of a leak, but it's not too bad. So now that's another thing, is that, you know, I'm really diligent on making sure I have no boost leaks, exhaust leaks, you know, things that plague turbo cars and hinder performance, really. I mean, there's nothing that's going to make your car seem weaker than a freaking boost leak that makes it just laggy as hell. So definitely build a boost leak tester if you have a turbo car. You know, do your work there. Now, as far as on the inside, we have a boost gauge, AEM wideband, and then oil pressure gauge. Now I still have stock tack working. One other thing, we could talk suspension. Obviously it's not required, but I'm on some actually knockoff Megan Racing coilovers, so I got them for $70. 70. So they make it sit pretty nice. I'm happy about that. I did inner tie rod spacers to give it a little more angle. Knuckles and all the drift mods are coming, but if we're just talking what it costs to turbo your IS300, it pretty well covers it, guys. You don't have to have a lot into it. You have to have dedication. You have to, you know, not be afraid to get your hands dirty. And sometimes you gotta ignore the masses and go outside of the norm a little bit. As long as you know what you're doing and do your research, you know, you can get there.